Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing an updated prediction of the 2022 United States gubernatorial elections. Republicans currently hold 28 seats and Democrats hold 22. Before I start, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like and comment. With all that said, let's get into it. So I'm going to start by filling out the states that are solid Democrat, and those states are California, Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois. I'm going to come back to New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and I believe that is all. Now for the solid Republican states, I'm going to fill in Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska. I'm going to come back to Oklahoma, but I'm going to fill in Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Iowa, Ohio, Florida, Vermont, and New Hampshire. So I said I was going to come back to Oklahoma, and the reason for that is there's actually some polling that has this close, or actually shows the Democrat Hoffmeister up over Stitt, and I don't think that's going to happen. I don't even think this is really going to be a close race. If you look into those polls, you can see that the samples are kind of skewed towards the Democrats, and that's just not really realistic for a state like Oklahoma. So I am filling in Oklahoma as solid Republican, but I did think that was worth noting. Kind of a similar story in New York. I also said I was coming back to New York. The polls in New York are showing a pretty close race. I don't think that's going to happen. New York's just too blue for it, even in this national environment, to flip or even come close to flipping. So I do think New York's still going to be a solid race. It might be closer than 15. I don't think it's going to be closer than 10, though. So now we have the solid states out of the way. Republicans are starting at 23 and Democrats are starting at 15. So now I'm going to get into the likely Republican states, starting with the state of Alaska. In terms of probability, Dunleavy is probably a pretty safe bet for re-election here, but just because of the ranked choice voting system and the fact that former Governor Bill Walker, who's a left-leaning independent, is running in this race, I do think it could get within 10, so I'm calling it likely Republican. The next likely Republican state is going to be the state of Georgia. This initially seemed like a competitive race, but Brian Kemp has just kind of run away with it. He's leading all the polls by huge margins, and polls in Georgia tend to be pretty accurate. I don't know how they're going to be this year. I think polls all around kind of suck this year, but I do think Brian Kemp is ahead. Stacey Abrams has kind of given up. Nobody really likes her down in Georgia, and so Brian Kemp's probably going to win by close to 9 points. So that's all of the likely Republican states. I'm going to move into the likely Democrat states now, starting with the state of Minnesota. Governor Tim Walz is the Democrat running here. He's going to win pretty easily. Scott Jensen, he isn't a great candidate. I mean, he's okay for Minnesota, but Minnesota's a pretty blue state, and Tim Walz is a relatively popular governor. It looks like other statewide offices, like the Attorney General's office, might go Republican, but I think Walz is a pretty safe bet for re-election, so I am calling Minnesota likely Democrat. The next likely Democrat state is going to be the state of Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is running a good campaign here. He's the current Attorney General of Pennsylvania. Doug Mastriano is not running a good campaign here. He's saying pretty stupid things to say when you're running for governor of Pennsylvania. Shapiro is leading the polls by 10 to 11 points on Real Clear Politics. I don't think it's going to be that much of a blowout. I think that polls in Pennsylvania are underestimating Western Pennsylvania. They did that in the primary, so that's a pretty good indicator that they're probably going to do that again in the general. I don't think it's going to be enough for Mastriano to win. I think Mastriano is probably losing by around 5 or 6 points right now, so I am calling it likely Democrat, although I do think it could be a high lean margin. So right now I'm calling it likely Democrat, though. So that's all I have for likely states. I'm going to move into the toss-ups now. I'm going to go west to east, starting with the state of Oregon. Oregon has kind of become a sleeper Republican flip. It's not even really a sleeper now. It looks like it is going to flip because Drazen has been leading all of the polls recently except 1 or 2. And it's because Betsy Johnson is kind of a left-wing candidate that is taking from the Democrat Tina Kotek. And in my last prediction, I had Oregon as blue still because I thought Betsy Johnson's numbers were going to drop. But it seems like she is still consistently getting in the high teens in support in polling. And so I do think she's going to take enough from Kotek for Oregon to flip. So I am calling Oregon tilt Republican. I think Drazen is going to narrowly win. Next up is the state of Nevada. I've made a couple videos on this and why Nevada is going to be a very good state for Republicans this year probably. Joe Lombardo is leading the polls now. He's led almost every poll in the state in the month of October, and he's probably going to win very narrowly. Steve Sisolak just isn't running a great campaign. He's kind of unpopular. Joe Lombardo is the sheriff of Clark County, which is going to get him a lot of votes from the population center of Nevada. So I do think he's going to be able to narrowly flip this state. All right, next up is going to be the state of Arizona. Kari Lake is running against Katie Hobbs, and Kari Lake is probably going to run away with this one. Katie Hobbs' campaign is falling apart. She's kind of like the Democratic Doug Mastriano. She keeps saying stupid things. She decided not to debate Kari Lake for some reason. And there was also this kind of scandal of her like planning a slave day or something when she was in high school. It's in her yearbook or something. I probably could call this one likely Republican ultimately, but I think Kari Lake's probably going to win by between 4 and 5, so I am calling Arizona lean Republican for now. Next up is the state of New Mexico. In New Mexico, Democratic Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is running against Republican former weatherman Mark Ronchetti, and Ronchetti kind of surprised everyone in 2020. He outperformed all expectations in New Mexico. He ran the Senate race, and it was supposed to be kind of a Democratic blowout, but the Democrat, Ben Ray Lujan, only won by 6 points. And so Ronchetti is an outperformer of expectations, and that led everyone to go into this election kind of expecting it to be more competitive. Ultimately, it looks like Michelle Lujan Grisham is going to win. Ronchetti's down in the polls, but I do think it's going to be pretty narrow. I think she's probably going to win by around 3 or 4, so I'm calling New Mexico lean Democrat. In the state of Kansas, Democrat Laura Kelly is running against Republican Derek Schmidt, and there really hasn't been enough polling out of this race to make any coherent call, in my opinion. There should be a lot more polling in this race, but there isn't any. It looks like it's going to be close. Laura Kelly outperformed expectations in 2018. She won by like 5 points. It was supposed to be competitive. I do think Derek Schmidt's narrowly going to win just because of the national environment. I think it's going to be a tilt Republican race, but I could see Laura Kelly pulling this off. I mean, she's able to appear as a moderate to voters, especially in Kansas, and so I do think she could win, but right now I think she will narrowly lose. In the state of Wisconsin, Tim Michels has been leading Tony Evers in most polling, and a couple of recent polls have had Evers up, especially Marquette, which has Evers up 1, which has brought the Real Clear Politics polling average to a tie. But it's important to note that Marquette's previous polling had Evers up 7 and 3, and so now Evers is at 1. So it's clear that the momentum is in Michels' favor, and most other polling does have Michels up. I think Michels is going to narrowly win. You know, usually Republicans are underestimated in Wisconsin, so he'll probably narrowly win. It could be even more than this, but right now I think he'll be below 2, so I'm going to call Wisconsin tilt Republican. In the state of Michigan, this one looked like it was going to be a blowout for Gretchen Whitmer. She was leading all the polls by like 10 plus until recently. Tudor Dixon has caught up in the polls. Not caught up, she's still behind by a couple points, but the momentum is in her favor. I said this from the start that this was going to be a lot closer of a race than people realize, and it looks like that's true. Even in the Real Clear Politics average right now, Tudor Dixon is up according to their adjusted polling average, which their adjusted polling average does have its problems, but I do think that it's getting a lot closer. I think Gretchen Whitmer is a narrow favorite right now. I think she's probably going to win by around 3, you know, similar to a 2020 Biden margin. So I am going to call Michigan lean Democrat. Finally, in the state of Maine, there's not a whole lot of polling out of there. It looks like Mills is going to win, but Paul LePage is an overperformer. But the first 2 times he was elected in 3 or 4 way races. So I don't think the overperformance is going to carry as much into this election. I do think Mills is probably going to win by around 4 or 5 points. So I'm calling Maine lean Democrat. So with that, here's what I have right now. I have Republicans having a net gain of 2 governorships, gaining Oregon, Nevada, Kansas, and Wisconsin, and Democrats gaining Massachusetts and Maryland. That gives Republicans 30 seats and Democrats 20 seats. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell, and also leave a like and comment telling me what you think about my predictions, because I would love to hear it. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.